My son handed me a check for $15,000 and called me a burden. My name is Thomas Bennett, and for 35 years I fixed cars in my garage in Greenwood. My hands stayed dirty so his could stay clean. I put him through private school, paid for his MBA, watched him become everything I never was. But when he sold my house for $2.1 million and slid that check across his marble desk like I was some homeless stranger, something inside me went quiet. Real quiet. "Go find a dump to live in, Dad," he said, not even looking up from his phone. 15 grand should last you a few years. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I just folded that check, put it in my pocket, and said, "Thank you, son." Then I signed the papers he pushed toward me. But before I left, I reminded him about one little detail. "You'll need to deal with the basement." His face went white instantly. The signs were there for years. I just chose to ignore them. Like that family dinner last Christmas when Kevin brought his new girlfriend Megan. She worked at some investment firm downtown, wore a dress that probably cost more than most people's car payments. Kevin spent the whole evening apologizing for me. "Dad's just a mechanic," he kept saying like it was some kind of disease. He doesn't really understand how business works. I was serving the pot roast I'd been cooking all day when Megan looked around my modest kitchen and said, "This is so quaint, like stepping back in time." Kevin laughed. "Yeah, Dad's never been much for keeping up with the times. Still balances his checkbook by hand, if you can believe that." What they didn't know was that I had just made my monthly insurance payment that morning. $892. Same amount I'd been paying for 5 years, ever since the collection reached a certain value. But to them, I was just the old man who got grease under his fingernails. The second sign came 3 months ago, right after I had my fender bender. Nothing serious, just clipped a mailbox backing out of Mrs. Henderson's driveway after fixing her husband's Cadillac. Kevin showed up at the emergency room like he was my legal guardian. "Dad, we need to talk about your living situation," he said, pacing around my hospital bed. "You're getting older. These little accidents, they're warning signs." "I'm fine, Kevin. It was just a scratch." "It's not just this. It's everything. The house is too big for you. Too much maintenance. And honestly, Dad, you're sitting on a gold mine. Property values in Greenwood have skyrocketed. You could sell that place, move into one of those nice senior communities, and have plenty left over." I looked at him for a long moment. Plenty left over for what? For whatever, for living expenses. For making sure you're taken care of. But I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't thinking about my comfort. He was thinking about his inheritance. He was thinking about that house as his future nest egg and me as an obstacle in the way of cashing in. That's when I realized my son had been calculating my worth his entire adult life, and he'd come up with a number that disappointed him. See, Kevin had graduated from Northwestern with big dreams and bigger debt. He'd started his own real estate development company, but the market had been tough. I'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine that he'd over-leveraged on some downtown project, that he needed capital fast. But to him, I was just the blue-collar dad who lived in an old house and drove a 20-year-old pickup truck. He looked at my life and saw limitation, saw failure. He never asked about the basement workshop. Never wondered why I paid property taxes on time every year despite supposedly living on a fixed income. Never questioned how a retired mechanic could afford to keep the heat on through Michigan winters without complaining about the bills. Kevin had made his assumption about who I was based on the dirt under my fingernails and the calluses on my palms. He decided that manual labor meant mental limitation, that working with my hands meant I couldn't understand money. And I let him think that for years. Maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I should have told him earlier about the clients who paid me in more than cash. About Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield, who gave me her deceased husband's gold cufflinks in 1989 when I rebuilt her Rolls-Royce engine. About Mr. Harold Patterson, who handed me silver coins from his collection when I fixed his vintage Jaguar. But I thought respect was something you gave your father, not something you calculated based on his bank balance. I was wrong. If I stayed quiet, I'd lose everything that mattered. Not the money, that was safe enough, but my dignity, my legacy, the respect I'd earned through 35 years of honest work. Kevin had already started making plans. I found out when Nancy Mitchell, my neighbor of 20 years, knocked on my door with a worried expression. "Thomas, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Kevin was here yesterday asking questions." I invited her in for coffee like we'd done hundreds of times before. Nancy had been bringing me her late husband's watches for repair since 1995. She knew I was good with delicate mechanisms, that I had steady hands and infinite patience. "What kind of questions?" "About your habits, your collecting." He wanted to know if you'd been hoarding anything valuable, old car parts, tools, that sort of thing. She paused, looking uncomfortable. "Thomas, he also asked about nursing homes. Said he was researching options for you." My blood went cold. "Did he now?" "He seemed to think you might need assistance soon. Said something about how you'd been acting confused lately, making poor financial decisions." Nancy's voice got sharper. "I told him you were the sharpest man in this neighborhood, but he just laughed. Said I didn't understand the early signs of cognitive decline." That's when I realized the full scope of Kevin's plan. He wasn't just taking my house. He was taking my independence, my right to make decisions about my own life. I'd been getting those property tax bills for 38 years, every November like clockwork, $2,463. I'd never missed a payment, never been late. But Kevin didn't see reliability. He saw an old man who might be losing his grip. The house was worth $2.1 million now, according to his calculations. But what he didn't understand was that I'd been paying insurance on something worth even more than that. Something that required specialized coverage, the kind you get when you're protecting assets that appreciate faster than real estate. David Mills had been coming by twice a year since 2019, always on a Saturday when the neighborhood was quiet. Professional appraiser, bonded and certified for precious metals evaluation. He'd spend 3 hours in my basement documenting every piece, updating the inventory for my insurance company. Last time in March, he'd whistled low under his breath. "Thomas, you know what you're sitting on here, right?" I knew exactly what I was sitting on, but apparently my son didn't. If I let Kevin steamroll me into some senior facility, what would happen to my collection? He'd probably call it junk, sell it as scrap metal, never knowing he was throwing away a fortune. All those pieces that represented decades of relationship building, trust earned one repair job at a time. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield's 1985 Rolex Submariner given to me when I restored her husband's 1962 Ferrari. Still in its original box, worth $18,000 today. Mr. Harold Patterson's silver dollar collection from the 1800s. Payment for rebuilding his Jaguar's transmission in 1994. The Persian rug from Dr. Ahmed Hassan, worth more than most people's cars. Given to me in gratitude for fixing his Mercedes when his daughter needed emergency surgery. Each piece had a story. Each piece represented a moment when someone trusted me with something precious and I'd earned something precious in return. But more than the financial loss, I'd lose something harder to quantify. I'd lose the truth of who I was. Kevin's version of Thomas Bennett, the confused old mechanic who needed to be managed and protected, would become the only version that mattered. I thought about my late wife Margaret, how proud she'd been when I'd started the collection, how she'd helped me organize the basement, install the proper storage systems. "You're building something important here, Thomas," she'd said. "Not just wealth, proof that honest work has value." Margaret understood that every gold coin, every piece of jewelry, every collectible item represented more than money. They represented relationships, trust, the kind of reputation you can't buy but can lose in an instant if you don't stand up for yourself. Kevin was betting that I was too old, too tired, too beaten down to fight back. He was counting on my love for him to override my self-respect. He was about to learn he'd calculated wrong. Because if I stayed quiet now, if I let him reduce me to a number on a balance sheet, then everything I'd worked for would become meaningless. Not just the money, but the man I'd been for 7 decades. Some things are worth more than keeping the peace. The confrontation came faster than I expected. Kevin showed up the next morning with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He'd brought along some woman in a navy blazer who introduced herself as a transition specialist from Golden Years Senior Living. "Dad, this is Monica. She's here to help us understand your options." I was drinking my coffee at the kitchen table, same table where I'd eaten breakfast for 38 years. I wasn't aware I needed options. Well, that's exactly the kind of thinking we need to address. Kevin sat down across from me, spreading papers like he was conducting a business meeting. Monica had a practiced sympathy voice. Mr. Bennett, your son is just concerned about your well-being. Living alone in such a large house can become overwhelming. Can it? Statistics show that seniors who downsize experience improved quality of life, better social connections, reduced stress about maintenance responsibilities. I held up my hand. Monica, how much is my son paying you for this visit? Her smile flickered. Simple question. What's your hourly rate? Kevin jumped in. Dad, that's not relevant. This is about your future. My future. I looked at him over my coffee cup. And how exactly did you decide what my future should look like? We've been through this. The house is too much for you. The neighborhood's changing. Property taxes keep going up. I've never missed a property tax payment. That's not the point. What is the point, Kevin? He leaned forward using his boardroom voice. The point is maximizing your assets while you're still able to make sound decisions. This house could sell for $2.1 million tomorrow. Subtract what you'd spend on a quality senior living arrangement, and you'd still have significant liquid capital for your remaining years. My remaining years? That's not what I meant. Sure it is. I stood up, walked to the kitchen window. My workshop was visible in the backyard. That old garage where I'd spent decades fixing other people's problems. Tell me something, son. When was the last time you were in my basement? Monica looked confused. Kevin shifted in his chair. What does that have to do with anything? Humor me. I don't know. High school. Why? Just curious. I turned back to face them. You've got my whole life figured out. My financial situation analyzed. My cognitive capacity assessed. But you've never bothered to look at what's actually in my house. Dad, I know what's in your house. Tools. Old car parts. Probably some collectibles worth a few hundred. Kevin's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and I saw his jaw tighten. I need to take this call. Monica, can you show Dad the Golden Years brochure, specifically the memory care wing? He stepped onto the back porch, his voice carrying through the screen door. No, Jerry. I told you the financing would be available by month end. I understand the deadline, but I'm handling a family situation here. Monica opened her leather folder. Mr. Bennett, I want you to know that memory care isn't a stigma anymore. Many successful professionals require specialized support as they age. Monica, can I ask you something? Of course. Do you have children? I do. 2 daughters. And if one of them decided you needed to be put somewhere for your own good, how would that make you feel? Her professional mask slipped for a second. That's different. I mean, if there were legitimate concerns about safety or cognitive function, who determines what's legitimate? Kevin came back inside, phone still pressed to his ear. Jerry, I'll call you back. He hung up, looked at me with obvious frustration. Dad, I don't have time for games today. I need an answer about Golden Years. They have availability now, but it won't last. An answer? Yes or no? Are you willing to tour the facility this week? I walked over to my desk in the corner, pulled out my checkbook, the same ledger I'd been keeping by hand for decades, just like Kevin had mocked. I flipped to the most recent entries. Kevin, what's the monthly cost for Golden Years? Monica consulted her papers. For the level of care we're discussing, approximately $4,000. I ran my finger down my ledger. Interesting. I pay more than that in insurance premiums. Insurance for what? Various things. I closed the checkbook. Monica, I think we're done here. Mr. Bennett, I really think you should consider. Ma'am, my son hired you to convince me I can't take care of myself, but he never asked me if I needed convincing. I walked to the front door, opened it. I appreciate your time. After Monica left, Kevin and I stood in my living room, the tension thick between us. Dad, you're making a mistake. Am I? The market won't stay this hot forever. If you wait too long, you'll miss the opportunity. What opportunity is that exactly? To maximize your equity while you're still mentally competent to make the decision. There was the real concern. Not my safety or happiness, but my legal capacity to sign papers. Son, I've been mentally competent for 68 years. Think I can manage a little longer? Kevin's patience snapped. This isn't about what you want anymore, Dad. It's about what makes sense. I looked at him for a long moment. My son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, helped with homework, cheered for at graduation. Kevin, when did I become your problem to solve? He didn't answer, but I could see it in his eyes. I'd been his problem for a long time. The next few days, Kevin started circling like a vulture. He'd drive by the house slowly, sometimes parking across the street to make phone calls. Nancy mentioned seeing him talking to other neighbors, asking questions about my recent behavior, building a case, gathering witnesses for whatever legal move he was planning. But he made one crucial mistake. He underestimated what people in this neighborhood actually thought of me. Tuesday morning, I was in my garage workshop when Ryan Bradley from 3 doors down stopped by. Ryan owned a body shop downtown. Had referred customers to me for years when they needed specialty work. Thomas, your boy was by yesterday asking strange questions. I looked up from the vintage Omega watch I was cleaning, belonged to Mrs. Patricia Chen, payment for fixing her husband's BMW last month. What kind of questions? Wanted to know if I'd noticed you acting confused, forgetting things, having trouble with basic tasks. Ryan's expression was puzzled. I told him you just rebuilt my Camaro's engine last month, and it purrs like a kitten. Asked him why he thought his own father was losing his mind. What did he say to that? Said I might not recognize the early signs that families often miss the warning signals. Ryan shook his head. Thomas, that boy's got some nerve. You're sharper than men half your age. Word was getting around. By Wednesday, I'd had visits from 4 different neighbors, all with similar stories. Kevin was conducting what amounted to a competency investigation, trying to establish a pattern of cognitive decline. What he didn't know was that he was talking to people who'd trusted me with their most valuable possessions for decades. People who'd watched me diagnose complex mechanical problems, who'd see me work with precision tools that required steady hands and clear thinking. Thursday afternoon, I was organizing the basement when I heard his key in the front door. He'd kept his childhood key, apparently deciding he had the right to use it whenever he felt like conducting an inspection. Dad, you down there? In the basement. His footsteps were hesitant on the wooden stairs. Kevin had always avoided my workshop, even as a kid. Too dirty, too mechanical, too far beneath his aspirations. What are you doing down here? I was standing in front of my steel cabinet, the one that looked like any other tool storage unit you'd find in 100 garages across America. Inside that cabinet was a climate-controlled vault that would have impressed a museum curator, but Kevin saw only what he expected to see. Organizing my collection. Collection of what? Old wrenches. I pulled out a small wooden box, opened it to reveal a 1943 Walking Liberty $half, pure silver, worth about $40 in current market value. I handed it to him. Mr. Patterson gave me this in 1991, payment for rebuilding his Jaguar's transmission. Kevin glanced at it dismissively. Dad, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You're keeping junk because you think it's valuable. This is maybe worth $5. Is it? Come on, it's just an old coin. I took it back, placed it carefully in its protective case. You're probably right. But what Kevin didn't see was the inventory sheet tucked behind the display case. A detailed catalog updated quarterly documenting every single item in my collection. Weights, purities, market values, insurance coverage amounts. He also didn't notice the small digital hydrometer reading the humidity levels or the tiny sensor monitoring temperature fluctuations, equipment that costs serious money, the kind you install when you're protecting serious assets. Dad, this is part of the problem. You're emotionally attached to things that have no real value. It's affecting your judgment. I nodded like I was considering his wisdom. Maybe you're right, son. I am right. And that's why we need to move quickly on the house sale. Get you somewhere with professional oversight before these attachment issues get worse. Professional oversight. People trained to help seniors make rational decisions about their possessions. I looked around my basement workshop. At the pegboard where I'd hung tools used to service million-dollar classic cars, at the workbench where I'd restored timepieces worth more than most people's annual salary, at the steel cabinet that held treasures my son couldn't recognize if they were displayed in a museum. Kevin, can I ask you something? Sure. When you sell this house, what happens to everything in the basement? He shrugged. Estate sale, probably. Whatever doesn't sell goes to charity. I nodded slowly. That's very generous of you. The breaking point came at the Greenwood Community Barbecue. Every year, the neighborhood association hosted a potluck in Riverside Park. I'd been attending for 32 years. Always brought my famous potato salad. Always enjoyed catching up with people whose cars I'd fixed, whose trust I'd earned. This year, Kevin decided to make an appearance. He arrived in his BMW dressed like he was heading to a country club instead of a community picnic. Megan was with him wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than some people's weekly grocery budget. They found me at the picnic table where I was sitting with Nancy Mitchell and the Hendersons. Dad, there you are. Kevin's voice carried across the park loud enough for nearby tables to hear. We've been looking everywhere for you. I'm right where I said I'd be. Yes, but we were worried when you didn't answer your phone. He turned to the others at my table. Dad's been having some issues with technology lately. Sometimes he forgets to charge his phone or leaves it in places he can't remember. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Battery's full. Kevin. I just had it on silent. Nancy Mitchell gave Kevin a sharp look. Your father's phone works just fine. He texted me yesterday about borrowing my ladder. Oh, that's another concern. Kevin sat down uninvited, launching into what sounded like a prepared speech. Dad's been doing projects around the house that really aren't safe for someone his age. Climbing ladders, heavy lifting, working with power tools in that cluttered basement of his. Mrs. Henderson frowned. Thomas fixed our garbage disposal last week. Did beautiful work, too. That's exactly what I mean. Kevin's voice got that condescending tone he used when explaining things to people he considered beneath him. Dad doesn't recognize his limitations anymore. He thinks he can still do everything he did 20 years ago. More people were listening now. The Johnsons from across the street. The Martinez family. Ryan Bradley from the body shop. People who'd known me for decades, who'd trusted me with everything from their cars to their grandfather clocks. Megan chimed in with her investment firm wisdom. It's really common with seniors. They develop what's called competence over confidence. They can't accurately assess their own declining abilities. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly. Something quieter and more dangerous. Declining abilities? I repeated. Dad, don't take it personally. It happens to everyone. The important thing is having family who can help you make good decisions before you hurt yourself or someone else. Ryan Bradley stood up from his table. Hold on there, Kevin. Your dad rebuilt my engine 3 weeks ago. Runs better than when I bought the car. With all due respect, Ryan, you might not be the best judge of quality work. The park got very quiet. Ryan Bradley had been fixing cars for 40 years. Owned the most respected body shop in 3 counties. Questioning his expertise was like questioning the Pope's knowledge of Catholicism. But Kevin wasn't finished. The truth is, Dad's been living in denial about his situation for years. Still thinks he's this master mechanic when really he's just an old man with outdated skills working on cars he doesn't understand anymore. He gestured dismissively toward the working-class families around us. And this neighborhood enables him. Everyone treating him like he's still relevant, still capable, when what he really needs is professional care. The silence stretched out like a held breath. Megan, oblivious to the mood shift, kept talking. Kevin's been researching the best facilities, places with activity directors, occupational therapy, structured social interaction with appropriate peer groups. Appropriate peer groups, Nancy Mitchell said slowly. Well, yes. People with similar educational backgrounds and life experiences. The current social isolation isn't healthy for someone in Thomas's condition. That's when something snapped. Not in me. In the neighborhood. Ryan Bradley walked over to our table. Kevin, I think you should apologize to your father. Apologize for what? For caring about his well-being? For being an embarrassment? This from Mrs. Martinez, whose husband's Ford I'd kept running for 15 years. Thomas Bennett has helped every family in this neighborhood, fixed our cars when we couldn't afford shop prices, never charged what the work was worth, treated everyone with respect. And you, she continued, pointing at Kevin, sit here insulting him in front of people who know better, insulting all of us, really. More voices joined in, people standing up, moving closer. I'd seen Kevin handle boardroom confrontations, but this was different. This was personal. This was about character. Thomas, called out Jim Patterson, not related to the man with the Jaguar, just coincidence of names. Tell your boy about the time you fixed my wife's wedding ring. I'd forgotten about that. Jim's wife had caught her ring in a door, mangled the gold band that had belonged to her grandmother. I'd spent 6 hours with jeweler's tools reshaping it perfectly. Or the time you restored my dad's pocket watch, added Sarah Chen. The one he carried in World War II. Or when you rebuilt my Harley after the accident, Ryan Bradley said. Did it for cost of parts because you knew I was out of work. Kevin looked around, realizing he'd miscalculated badly. These weren't just neighbors. These were people whose lives I'd touched, whose problems I'd solved, whose trust I'd earned through decades of quiet competence. Dad, he said, his voice smaller now. I'm just trying to help. Help. I stood up slowly, looked around at faces that had become familiar over 3 decades. Kevin, you want to help me? Yes. Then stop telling people I'm broken. His face flushed red. You're being unreasonable. Everyone here can see that you're not thinking clearly. Can they? Yes. This whole display, this defensiveness, it's exactly what the specialists warned me about. Seniors who refuse to acknowledge their declining capacity often become agitated when confronted with reality. Megan nodded sagely. It's a documented psychological response. Nancy Mitchell had heard enough. Young man, the only declining capacity I see here is your capacity for basic human decency. The crowd murmured agreement. Kevin stood up, straightened his expensive shirt. Fine, have it your way, Dad. But when you fall down those basement stairs or burn the house down because you forgot to turn off the stove, don't say I didn't try to help. He started walking toward his car, Megan trailing behind. But then he turned back and delivered the line that changed everything. Enjoy playing with your worthless junk collection while you can, Dad. Because whether you cooperate or not, that house is getting sold. I've already talked to a lawyer about competency proceedings. The park went dead silent. Competency proceedings. Legal action to have me declared mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. I looked at my son standing there in his $1,000 outfit, threatening to take away my independence in front of people who'd known me longer than he'd been alive. And I made a decision. Kevin, I called out loud enough for everyone to hear. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., come by the house. There's something in the basement I think you should see. The next morning, I was ready. I'd called Jennifer Brooks at 8 a.m. Jennifer had been my attorney for 15 years, handled my estate planning, knew about the collection, knew about the insurance policies, knew exactly what Kevin was walking into. Thomas, are you sure about this approach? I'm sure. It's going to be quite a shock for him. Good. I'd also called David Mills, my certified appraiser. David had been documenting my collection since 2019, updating the valuations every 6 months for insurance purposes. He agreed to come by at 9:30, bring his equipment, make everything official. And I'd called Nancy Mitchell, asked her to come by at 10:15 as a witness. Some conversations needed witnesses. Kevin arrived exactly on time, which surprised me. He brought Megan and another man I didn't recognize. Tall, thin, carrying a briefcase that screamed attorney. "Dad, this is Christopher Reeves. He specializes in elder law." Christopher offered a practiced handshake. "Mr. Bennett, Kevin's told me about your situation. I want you to know that family conservatorship proceedings are designed to protect seniors, not punish them." Conservatorship proceedings. When family members have legitimate concerns about a senior's capacity to make sound financial decisions, the court can appoint a responsible party to manage assets and living arrangements. Kevin looked almost apologetic. "Dad, I didn't want it to come to this. But after yesterday, after seeing how defensive and irrational you got, I got irrational. The whole neighborhood thing was embarrassing for everyone. These people don't understand your real situation." Megan nodded sympathetically. "We're just trying to protect you from making decisions you might regret later." I looked at the three of them standing in my living room. Expensive clothes, expensive educations, expensive assumptions about the old man who fixed cars for a living. "Well," I said, "since we're talking about protecting assets, maybe I should show you what exactly you'd be protecting." I led them toward the basement stairs. Kevin hesitated. "Dad, I don't need to see your tool collection." "Trust me, you do." The basement looked exactly like what it was. A workshop where serious mechanical work had been done for decades. Pegboard walls covered with tools, workbenches scarred from years of use, the smell of oil and metal polish in the air. But I walked them past all of that to the back corner where my steel cabinet stood. "Kevin, you asked about my collection yesterday." "Dad, please, let's not do this again." I opened the cabinet door. The first thing they saw was the climate control system. Digital displays showing temperature and humidity, the kind of equipment museums use to protect valuable artifacts. The second thing they saw was the inventory sheets, typed, organized, cross-referenced, updated quarterly. The third thing they saw was the vault itself. It wasn't large, about the size of a walk-in closet, but every surface was lined with custom-fitted displays, each item in its own protective case. Each case labeled with dates and provenance information. David Mills was already there setting up his equipment. "Morning, Thomas. Ready for the update." Kevin stared at David's professional gear. Precision scales, magnification equipment, testing devices that cost more than most people's monthly salary. "Dad, what is all this?" I walked to the first display case. "This is what you called my junk collection." I opened the case, removed a small wooden box. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was Mrs. Whitfield's 1985 Rolex Submariner. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield gave me this in 1989, payment for rebuilding her husband's 1962 Ferrari engine. She said it was worth more than money to her family, but worth less than what I'd done for them. David looked up from his equipment. "Current market value on that Submariner is $18,200. Kevin's mouth opened slightly. I moved to the next case. This Persian rug belonged to Dr. Hassan, payment for fixing his Mercedes when his daughter needed emergency surgery and he couldn't get to the hospital. Handwoven circa 1920. David consulted his tablet. Appraised value $22,500. I kept moving through the collection. Each piece had a story. Each story had a value that went far beyond money. But the money was real, too. Mr. Patterson's silver dollar collection, 1800s. Payment for rebuilding his Jaguar transmission in 1994. Mrs. Chen's diamond necklace. Payment for fixing her BMW after her husband's stroke. Mr. Thompson's gold cufflinks. Payment for restoring his vintage Porsche. David was running calculations on his tablet, updating his inventory. "Thomas, we're looking at significant appreciation since my last appraisal." "How significant?" Kevin's voice had gotten very small. David looked at his screen. Current total value $2,347,600. The basement went completely silent. Megan sat down hard on my tool bench. $2.3 million. "That's conservative," David said. "Some of these pieces are appreciating faster than the general precious metals market. The collectible coins especially." Christopher Reeves, the elder law attorney, was staring at the vault like he'd discovered King Tut's tomb. "Mr. Bennett, are you saying you accumulated this collection as payment for automotive repairs over 35 years? Yes. And it's all documented, insured." I handed him a folder. Insurance policy with Meridian Specialty Coverage. 2.3 million in coverage updated annually. Premium $892 per month. Kevin was still trying to process what he was seeing. "Dad, I don't understand. You live like, I mean your house, your truck." "Like what, Kevin?" "Like you don't have money." "I don't have money. I have something better. I have relationships. Trust. 35 years of people knowing that Thomas Bennett does what he says he'll do, fixes what's broken, treats valuable things with respect." Jennifer Brooks appeared at the top of the stairs. "Thomas, sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." She came down, saw the group assembled around the vault, smiled. "Ah, the revelation." Kevin looked at her. "You knew about this?" "I've been Thomas's attorney for 15 years. I helped him set up the insurance, the climate control, the documentation system. This isn't a hobby, young man. It's a sophisticated investment portfolio." Megan found her voice. But you're a mechanic." I was a mechanic who understood that wealthy people sometimes value skilled work more than money. Mrs. Whitfield offered me cash for the Ferrari rebuild, $3,000. But when she offered me her husband's Rolex instead, I understood what she was really giving me. David looked up from his equipment. "The Rolex has appreciated 400% since 1989. The cash would have been spent decades ago." I walked to another display case. People trusted me with their most valuable possessions, their cars. And sometimes, when money wasn't enough to express their gratitude, they trusted me with other valuable things, too. "But why didn't you tell me?" Kevin's voice was barely a whisper. "Tell you what? That I was successful. That I was good at what I did. That people respected my work enough to pay me in family heirlooms." I thought. You thought I was a failure? You thought manual labor meant mental poverty? You thought working with my hands meant I couldn't understand value?" Nancy Mitchell's voice came from the stairs. "Thomas, is this a bad time?" "No, Nancy, come on down. I'd like you to meet my son's attorney." Nancy descended the stairs, took in the scene, the vault, the equipment, the stunned faces of Kevin and his companions. "Oh my," she said. "So you finally showed them. You knew too." Kevin looked around desperately. "Did everyone know except me?" Nancy's expression was pitying. "Honey, everyone knew your father was special. We just didn't know you'd never figured it out." David finished his calculations. "Thomas, I need to update your insurance company. We're looking at a 15% appreciation since my last appraisal." Christopher Reeves cleared his throat. "Mr. Bennett, I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about your financial capacity." "Has there?" "Obviously, someone with assets of this magnitude doesn't require conservatorship protection." I looked at Kevin, my son, the boy I'd raised, educated, loved unconditionally. "Kevin, yesterday you told me I was too mentally incompetent to manage my own affairs. Today you're looking at 35 years of careful, patient, sophisticated asset accumulation. So which is it?" He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know." "What exactly didn't you know?" "I didn't know you were successful. I've been successful every day of my adult life. I just measured success differently than you do." The vault hummed quietly around us. Climate control maintaining perfect conditions for treasures accumulated one act of excellence at a time. Kevin looked at his attorney, at Megan, at the fortune he'd been preparing to liquidate at an estate sale. "Dad, what happens now?" I walked to my workbench, picked up the folder containing property deeds, insurance policies, legal documents Jennifer had prepared over the years. "Now, son, you learn the difference between wealth and value." The legal consequences came swift and clean. Jennifer Brooks opened her briefcase and pulled out a document I'd had her prepare months ago, back when Kevin first started making noises about my declining capacity. Kevin, this is a legally binding statement of financial competency witnessed and notarized documenting your father's complete cognitive awareness and decision-making capability as of 3 months ago. Christopher Reeves examined the document. His face went pale. This is quite comprehensive. It includes cognitive assessment results, financial management documentation, and testimony from multiple professional sources about Thomas's mental acuity. Jennifer's voice was crisp, professional. Any attempt to claim incompetency would require overturning expert medical and psychological evaluations. Kevin looked like he'd been hit by a truck. "Dad, you planned this?" "I planned to protect myself if my own son tried to have me declared incompetent." Megan was staring at the vault displays like they might disappear if she blinked. "How much did you say this was worth?" $2.3 million. David was updating his insurance documentation. Actually, 2.4 after today's market adjustments. I walked to my desk, pulled out another folder. "Kevin, here's something else you might find interesting." Inside were property records, deeds, transfer documents. The house you were planning to sell. I've owned it free and clear since 1992. No mortgage, no liens, no debt of any kind. Property taxes current through 2025. Christopher Reeves was speed-reading the documents. "Mr. Bennett, these records show continuous ownership for 32 years with consistent tax payments, no financial irregularities. Meaning there's no legal basis for any competency proceedings. Your financial management has been exemplary." Kevin sat down heavily on my tool bench. "Dad, I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "Yesterday, when I said I was selling the house, you signed the papers." "I did. Why?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, how little you thought of me, whether you'd actually steal your father's home for money you didn't think he had." "I wasn't stealing. I thought I was helping. By taking my house and giving me $15,000, by calling me a burden in front of my neighbors, by threatening legal action to control my life?" Nancy Mitchell spoke up from the corner where she'd been watching. "Kevin, your father called me last week. Told me what you were planning. Asked me to witness what happened. You knew he was going to sign. I knew he was going to test you." Nancy's voice was sad. "And honey, you failed that test pretty badly." Jennifer was organizing papers. "Kevin, legally speaking, you have no claim on this property or any of your father's assets. The documents you had him sign yesterday are void. You can't sell property you don't own. But he signed them willingly, under false pretenses. You misrepresented your authority and his financial situation. That's fraud." Christopher Reeves was backing toward the stairs. "I think I should leave. This isn't the situation I was led to believe." "Christopher." My voice stopped him. "You came here prepared to take away an old man's independence. Maybe you should stick around and see what that old man actually built." Megan found her voice. "Thomas, I owe you an apology." "We all do." "Do you?" "We made assumptions about your lifestyle, your financial situation, your capability. You made assumptions about my worth based on my clothes, my truck, my profession." David was packing up his equipment. "Thomas, I'll have the updated appraisal report to your insurance company by end of business today. Anything else you need?" "Just one thing." I walked to the vault, removed a small display case. Inside was a simple gold coin, nothing fancy, worth maybe $800. I handed it to Kevin. This was the first piece. 1989, Mrs. Whitfield's payment for fixing her husband's Ferrari. Kevin held it carefully like it might break. "Dad, why are you showing me this?" "Because this coin represents something you never understood. A woman trusted me with her dead husband's car, something irreplaceable to her. And when I fixed it perfectly, she trusted me with something else irreplaceable. The Rolex, the relationship, the trust, the respect. I took the coin back. That's what I built down here, Kevin. Not just wealth. Proof that I was worth trusting." Kevin's voice was very small. "And I proved I wasn't worth trusting." I didn't answer that. Didn't need to. Jennifer closed her briefcase. Thomas, the legal issues are resolved. Kevin has no authority to sell your property or make decisions about your care. The competency documents protect you from any future attempts. Thank you, Jennifer. But Thomas, you might want to think about having a longer conversation with your son about what trust means and what it costs when you break it. Kevin was still sitting on my tool bench, holding his head in his hands. Dad, what can I do to fix this? I looked at him, my son, the boy I'd raised, the man who tried to steal my life. Kevin, you can start by understanding that you can't fix 30 years of disrespect with one apology. The vault hummed quietly around us, protecting treasures earned through trust, built one repair job at a time. The ripple effects hit Kevin's life like dominoes falling. By Wednesday, word had spread through Greenwood about what happened at the community barbecue and the basement revelation. Small communities talk. And when a successful real estate developer publicly humiliates his own father only to discover that father is worth more than him, people notice. Nancy Mitchell called me Thursday morning. Thomas, I thought you should know. Kevin's business partner came by yesterday asking questions. What kind of questions? About Kevin's judgment. Apparently, there's some downtown development project that's been struggling. And after what happened Sunday, his investors are getting nervous. That made sense. Real estate development is built on reputation and trust. If you can't assess the value of your own father's assets, how can investors trust you to assess market opportunities? Ryan Bradley stopped by Friday with more information. Thomas, my buddy Jerry works at First National, says Kevin came in Tuesday trying to get a line of credit using future inheritance as collateral. Future inheritance. Jerry had to explain that you can't borrow against assets you don't own and might never own, especially when those assets are worth 4 times what the loan application claimed. The financial consequences were immediate and concrete. Kevin's development company, Millennium Properties, had been counting on the house sale to provide bridge financing for their downtown project. Without that capital injection, they were facing serious cash flow problems. More damaging was the reputation hit. In a business where credibility equals currency, the story of Kevin Bennett, the successful developer who tried to scam his own father out of millions, spread quickly through professional networks. Megan called me Saturday morning. Thomas, I wanted to apologize personally and to let you know that Kevin and I were taking a break. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you're not, and you shouldn't be. I've been thinking about what I said Sunday about appropriate peer groups and competence over confidence. I was horrible. She paused and I could hear traffic in the background. Thomas, can I ask you something? When you were building that collection, investing in all those pieces, did you have an MBA, a financial advisor, a portfolio manager? No, I did it all myself. Made those decisions, built those relationships, accumulated millions of dollars in assets through pure judgment and expertise. I suppose. And I stood in your basement and acted like you needed professional help to manage your life. Her voice was shaky. I work in investment management, Thomas. I help wealthy clients protect their assets. And I completely failed to recognize expertise when I was looking right at it. Sunday, Kevin finally came by alone. He looked terrible, hadn't been sleeping, probably hadn't been eating. The confident businessman from a week ago had been replaced by someone who understood he'd made a catastrophic mistake. Dad, can we talk? I let him in, made coffee, same as I'd done hundreds of times over the years, but everything felt different now. My business is in trouble. I heard the downtown project is probably dead. Investors are pulling out. My partner's talking about dissolving the company. I sipped my coffee, waited. It's not just the money, Dad. It's my reputation. People are saying I can't be trusted to assess value, make sound judgments. They're saying if I try to cheat my own father, what would I do to them? Are they wrong? Kevin was quiet for a long time. No, they're not wrong. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. Start over, I guess, assuming anyone will work with me again. He looked up at me. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Go ahead. Can you ever forgive me? I set down my coffee cup, thought about the question. Kevin, forgiveness isn't the issue. What is the issue? Trust. You didn't just try to take my house and my independence. You tried to convince other people I was incompetent. You tried to destroy my reputation to justify stealing from me. I thought I was helping. No, you didn't. You thought I was worthless, and you were angry that worthless people don't deserve nice houses. Kevin flinched like I'd hit him. The question isn't whether I can forgive you. The question is whether you can rebuild yourself into someone worth trusting. How do I do that? The same way I built that collection. One relationship at a time, one honest transaction at a time, one day at a time of proving you're the person you say you are. Kevin nodded slowly. Dad, would you consider giving me another chance? I looked at my son, really looked at him. Under the expensive clothes and the MBA confidence, he was still the boy I'd raised, still the child who'd once trusted me completely before the world taught him to measure people by their bank accounts. Kevin, you'll always be my son, but if you want to be my friend again, you're going to have to earn it. The coffee was getting cold between us, but neither of us moved to warm it up. Some conversations require cold coffee and uncomfortable silences. Some relationships require rebuilding from the foundation up. 6 months later, things have settled into a new normal. Kevin sold his BMW, moved into a smaller apartment, took a job with an established real estate firm instead of running his own company. He's learning to rebuild his reputation one honest transaction at a time, just like I suggested. He comes by every other Sunday now, not to check on me or assess my competency, but to help with yard work, fix things around the house, learn some of the skills he spent 30 years thinking were beneath him. Last month, he asked if I'd teach him about the collection. Not the monetary value, but the stories, the relationships, the trust that each piece represents. Dad, Mrs. Chen stopped me at the grocery store yesterday. She wanted to know if you were still fixing watches. What did you tell her? I told her you were, but your schedule was getting pretty busy. He paused. She said her grandson has a pocket watch that belonged to his great-grandfather. Brought it back from Vietnam. Did she ask you to bring it by? She asked if I thought you'd consider it worth your time. I almost smiled at that. What did you tell her? I told her that my father had taught me something important recently. That every broken thing is worth fixing if someone cares enough about it. The basement vault is still there, still climate-controlled, still growing slowly as neighbors and friends bring me projects that mean more to them than money. But I've made some changes. I had Jennifer update my will. The collection will eventually go to the Greenwood Historical Society with a provision that it remain on display as the Thomas Bennett Collection of Community Trust. A reminder that value comes in many forms. I also had her draft a new document about Kevin, not cutting him out, but establishing clear boundaries. He'll inherit the house, but only after proving he understands what he almost threw away. As for Kevin himself, he's learning slowly. Some lessons take years to stick. Last Sunday, while we were organizing tools in the garage, he said something that surprised me. Dad, I'm sorry it took me so long to understand what you built here. What did I build, Kevin? Respect. Real respect. The kind you can't buy or inherit. The kind you have to earn. I nodded, handed him a wrench. Good. Now, let's see if you can learn to earn some of your own. The work continues. The trust rebuilds. One honest day at a time.